In a small, forgotten village in the heart of Transylvania, surrounded by dense forests that seemed to guard secrets for centuries, stood a house whose story should never be told. This ancient structure, made of rough stone and worn wood, had been locked for decades. But local residents whispered about horrifying events that transpired there. Something beyond human comprehension. They say the last inhabitant, a man named Emile, was found in unspeakable conditions. Some accounts claim he slowly went mad after experiencing a succession of events that made him question his own sanity. Legend has it that on a cold autumn night, Emile witnessed an obscure entity emerge from the shadows of the forest, a shapeless figure with eyes that glowed red that pursued him into the house, where he disappeared without a trace. Witnesses claim that on intensely foggy days, agonizing screams can be heard echoing from the house's walls, screams that chill even the bravest. Local investigators who attempted to enter the house to document what was happening found deep scratch marks on the walls and furniture, as if something enormous and desperate had tried to escape from within. The stench of iron and flesh that permeated the air caused immediate nausea and discomfort, driving away anyone who tried to stay inside for too long. One of these investigators, a young archaeologist named Victor, reported feeling an invisible touch on his skin, a pressure so intense it seemed to slowly drain the life from him. He tried to run, but looking back, he saw figures writhing in the dark, as if they were souls trapped in eternal torment. From that day on, Victor mysteriously disappeared and was never seen again. This house carries a past stained by tragedies, far beyond what imagination could conceive. Centuries ago, in an era dominated by fear and superstition, the family inhabiting that place was accused of dark practices. They say macabre rituals were performed in the house's basement, where shadowy creatures were invoked and human lives sacrificed in the name of powers man should not possess. One of the most notorious victims was a 17-year-old girl named Isolde, who, according to reports, was found hanging by rusted chains, her gaze fixed on emptiness and her skin as pale as the moon. The story goes that her soul never rested, wandering within the house's walls, trying to break free from the suffering she endured in life. Local residents avoid even mentioning her name, as if speaking it would awaken a curse. On one of those winter nights, a group of adventurous tourists decided to defy their fear and visit the house, seeking paranormal evidence. Equipped with cameras and electronic gear, they entered the place with a courage few possess. For hours, they noticed nothing out of the ordinary, until suddenly, their devices began to malfunction, and their flashlight beams flickered frantically. One of the young women in the group, Lara, felt an icy hand grab her arm, and turning around, saw no one. Panic seized everyone, and when they tried to leave, the main door violently broke, trapping them inside the house. The following hours were a living hell, with unintelligible whispers seeming to come from the walls, shadows moving in their peripheral vision, and the constant sensation that something was close, watching, waiting for the right moment to attack. When they were finally found, Lara was unconscious with deep marks on her arm, while the others showed signs of extreme exhaustion, unable to explain what they had faced. Since then, no one has dared to cross the threshold of that structure again. The weight of these stories lies not just in the supernatural experiences, but in the feeling that something far beyond human comprehension dwells there, something that is not merely a spirit, but an ancient force of darkness that feeds on fear and pain. Nights in the village have become silent and tense, with people avoiding going out after dark, and the elders always saying prayers to protect the souls of those who still dare to enter that forest. The truth is, the house remains there, intact, hiding its secrets amidst the fog and solitude, a grim reminder that evil can hide anywhere, even in the most remote corners of the planet. The village of Blackwood, nestled deep within the dense forests of the American Northwest, carries a macabre history that few dare to speak aloud. It all began with the sudden disappearance of an entire family, the McAllisters, known for their simple and peaceful life. The patriarch, Gregory, was around 55 years old and a former soldier who enjoyed solitude, living with his wife and son in an old cabin isolated from the community. On the night everything changed, neighbors heard desperate screams coming from the house, followed by an absolute silence as if time had frozen at that instant. When local officers finally arrived, they found a scene impossible to describe without a lump in one's throat. Destroyed furniture, deep marks on the walls made by something with sharp claws, and in the center of the room, a ritualistic circle, painted with a red liquid, still fresh. Most disturbing was what was missing. No sign of the family's bodies. However, fragments of torn clothing and bloodstains indicated a brutal struggle. Investigations were halted after reports from police. Officers who also began to feel an invisible presence, a suffocating weight that stole their breath. One of them, Officer Harris, had to be hospitalized after an inexplicable fall and a nervous breakdown, claiming that a monstrous shadow accompanied him day and night. The case was officially filed as a disappearance, but for the residents of Blackwood, the truth was far more terrifying and remained silently guarded for years. Months later, a lone hunter named Jonas decided to investigate on his own, drawn by the sinister stories circulating in the region. During a cold pre-dawn, he ventured into the woods near the old McAllister cabin. What he found surpassed any nightmare. A circle of human bones scattered around a deformed tree, with carved symbols that seemed to pulse in a scarlet hue under the moonlight. As he approached, Jonas felt as if nature around him was alive, whispering incomprehensible words that caused him a headache. That's when a figure appeared, standing among the shadows, faceless, dressed in aged rags, emitting a guttural sound that sent shivers down his spine. Jonas tried to flee, but stumbled and fell, and looking back, he saw the creature slowly approaching, with eyes that seemed to devour his soul. He disappeared that night, and only his frozen footprints remained. In the snow, a silent trail that was never found. The story of Blackwood is just one of many that reveal a phenomenon many call the curse of the forgotten forests. Isolated places where ancient and violent forces seem to watch over and punish any intruder. Reports speak of disappearances, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable phenomena that defy reason. For the residents, the fear is so real that few even leave their homes after sunset, and superstition governs daily life. Some braver souls claim that the only way to ward off the curse is through purification rituals, but such practices only heighten the terror, as they seem to awaken even more the wrath of these dark entities. And here, if you're feeling that chill down your spine, the anguish these stories bring, I want to invite you to continue this journey with us. But before you go on, how about you share with us in the comments? What feeling did these stories awaken in you? Or perhaps, have you ever had an experience that deeply affected your understanding of the world? I love reading these real stories, because deep down, we know that the supernatural is as vast as our imagination, and perhaps a little more terrifying. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to subscribe to become part of this community where fear is real, and the stories are deeper than they seem. Trust me, you're not alone here. In the heart of the Ural Mountains, in deep Russia, there's a village where time seems to have stood still and nature reigns supreme. During the harsh winter, when snow covers everything with a deadly silence, residents avoid talking about the old abandoned mine nearby, where strange occurrences have frightened even the bravest workers in the region. The mine, once a source of life and wealth, became the scene of unspeakable horrors after an accident that claimed the lives of several miners. But what happened next was what truly terrified everyone. Among the accounts is that of Pavel, a man who worked there years after the tragedy. He recounted that during a night inspection, he heard sounds of rhythmic knocking, as if someone was calling for help. But as he approached, the darkness seemed to suck the light from his lantern, and he felt an invisible presence that froze him in place. The next moment, Pavel felt claws scratching his back, and it was only after a desperate escape that he managed to flee, with marks that never healed and nightmares that haunted him. But the most macabre thing about that mine was a local legend that spoke of the Guardian of the Depths, an ancient creature said to have been awakened by the accident and now inhabiting the underground galleries, protecting its territory with relentless fury. The descriptions are vague and terrible. An enormous being, covered in skin thick as stone, with glowing eyes and sharp teeth that seemed made to tear souls, not flesh. They say that those who enter the mine without respect or with evil intentions are marked never to leave. their screams echoing through the dark tunnels until they are lost in the void. A group of young explorers who decided to visit the mine during the summer disappeared without a trace, and their equipment was found scattered on the ground, as if they had fled in terror. Some residents swear that on stormy nights, the lightning reveals figures moving among the trees, like sentinels guarding the entrance to that abyss. In another part of the world, in the dense Amazon rainforest, an equally terrifying story circulates among local tribes, passed down from generation to generation in hushed tones. It is the curse of the Lady of the Mist, an entity that, they say, is the vengeful spirit of a woman who lost her life brutally and unjustly, and who now wanders the forests, seeking souls to drag into her dark realm. Her description is that of a pale figure, shrouded in thick mist, with empty eyes and a voice that mimics the laments of the lost. The most recent accounts come from a guide named Antonio, who was leading a scientific expedition to the region. During a rainy night, he heard a melancholic song that seemed to come from the heart of the forest. Driven by curiosity, he followed the sound to a point where the mist thickened, and that's when he saw her for the first time, the Lady of the Mist. Antonio tried to run, but his legs felt heavy, as if held by invisible chains. He fainted and woke up hours later, alone, with his group gone. To this day, he bears the scars of that encounter and warns no one to venture into those woods when the mist descends. It's stories like these that show fear isn't just in what you see, but in what remains hidden, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. The line between the world of the living and the unknown is thinner than we can imagine, and those who venture too far may end up paying a very high price. But we won't stop here. There's much more to tell, and you'll want to stay until the end of this dark journey. In the rural Scottish countryside, amidst misty hills and abandoned fields, a story circulates that few dare to tell, especially after sunset. It's the case of McGregor Farm, a place where death and the supernatural intertwine tragically and indelibly. Decades ago, a man named Duncan McGregor, who looked after the property with his son and wife, began reporting strange phenomena. Voices whispering in ancient Gaelic, shadows passing through walls, and an inexplicable cold that chilled to the bone. One night after an intense storm, Duncan mysteriously disappeared, leaving only a dark, sticky stain on the kitchen floor, which local residents swear is blood. His wife and son, tormented, decided to abandon the farm, but the evil dwelling there seemed unwilling to let them leave. Years later, a group of paranormal investigators decided to explore the farm, equipped with infrared cameras and motion sensors. During the first night, they captured disturbing images, translucent forms moving rapidly, sounds of heavy footsteps running through empty corridors, and an insistent whisper that seemed to form words of lament and rage. One of the group members, named Fiona, claimed to have been touched by an invisible force that threw her against a wall, leaving purple marks on her arm. The next morning, everyone awoke exhausted with the feeling that something malicious had drained their energy. Nevertheless, they continued the investigation, but on the third day, Fiona disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a recording where her desperate scream echoes to this day. Since then, McGregor Farm has been avoided by all, transforming into a dark symbol of what fear can do to the mind and body. The farm's phenomenon isn't unique in Scotland. Similar stories circulate across the country, involving ancient castles, dense forests, and even forgotten towns. What seems to connect all these narratives is the presence of entities that not only haunt but also claim lives. These forces appear to have a will of their own, feeding on human pain, perpetuating a cycle of terror and despair. In some cases, reports speak of possessions, where the victim transforms into something monstrous, losing their own identity to an insatiable darkness. These episodes always end shrouded in mystery, without satisfactory scientific or religious explanations, leaving only the certainty that the world is much larger and more terrifying than our limited perception allows. Now, if you've followed along this far, it's because curiosity has overcome fear, and that's incredible. If these stories have given you that strange chill, that urge to look back, how about leaving a comment about something you would never do to avoid putting yourself in danger? Or perhaps tell us the most bizarre experience you've ever heard or lived, the one that made your heart race. Your participation helps keep this community alive and active, where every account is an important piece of this dark puzzle. And of course, if you're not yet part of this team, subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these mysteries together, always with respect and caution, because what comes next is even more intense. In rural Scotland, among the misty hills, just as shadows intertwined in the story of McGregor Farm, a presence loomed large. After Fiona's disappearance, the investigators became mere memories, like echoes of a tragedy. With each passing month, the farm unveiled new horrors, the rumors spreading like plagues. Nights grew long and dark. The few who dared approach the property heard distant laments, as if the ghosts of the McGregors cried out for justice. No one knew what had happened to Duncan and his family, but the farm had plans to claim more souls. One night, a group of young people, drawn by the place's macabre fame, decided to spend the night at the farm. With flickering flashlights, they crossed the threshold of the creaking door, the walls seeming to breathe around them. They laughed nervously, but the atmosphere soon grew heavy. Each step echoed like a warning. Around the kitchen table where Duncan had once disappeared, the conversation turned strange. Amidst whispers of ancient curses and voices in Gaelic, one of the young women, Clara, began to feel a pressure on her chest, as if the farm itself were consuming her. Her friends laughed, but soon their laughter was silenced by a piercing scream that tore through the air, similar to Fiona's scream. Strange light filled the room, and the shadows began to writhe like serpents. The young people realized they weren't alone. The forms flickered, revealing outlines of pale, tormented figures. Pale hands reached out, seeking life. Clara, in a fit of panic, started to run, traversing corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. Her friends called her, but their voices seemed distant, muffled by the echo of what could be Duncan's spirit, or something far more malicious. Then, in a moment of surrealism, Clara turned and saw the faces of her family, their eyes empty and weeping. Terror froze her, and she could no longer move. When day finally broke, only Clara was found, standing in the kitchen, her eyes vacant and the air heavy with something unspeakable. Nothing else remained of the group of young people, except their terrifying echo on the walls. The stories of McGregor Farm gained a new dimension, involving the young woman who seemed to have been in contact with incomprehensible forces. Residents of the region then began reporting nocturnal sightings of a pale figure wandering among the hills, weeping, as if searching for something lost. And so, McGregor Farm, once a home, became a hunting ground for those dark forces that fed on fear and hopelessness. When the sun sets and the mist settles, hidden dangers lurk in the shadows, ready to claim their next victims. And you, safely behind your screen, can't help but feel that chill down your spine, questioning what truly hides in those dark hills, awaiting the next curious soul to cross its path.